An ancient Sumerian might be bewildered by just about everything in your 21st century home, except that is a handbag. The handbag of the gods is an impossible artifact. First found in Mesopotamia, this strange object held by the Anunnaki gods baffled experts. Ancient Sumerians were more than familiar with handbags. Several Sumerian carvings include depictions of handbag-like shaped items, but then it was found somewhere else. Göbekli Tepe, a site from the end of the last ice age, and in Central America held by mech gods. How these civilizations had no contact. We are going to reveal what was inside this bag. It wasn't pollen, it was a technology that could build pyramids, edit DNA, or even power a lost civilization. This is the story of what's inside. The cradle of mystery. This was the seat of power for King Ashurnirpal II, and a fearsome ruler who reigned around 870 BC. This palace wasn't just a home, it was a statement. Its walls were lined with massive 10-foot-tall slabs of alabaster, each one covered in detailed carvings. As Laird's team brushed away the dust of millennia, they found themselves face to face with beings that were not quite human. They were towering figures with human bodies, but many had the heads of eagles and massive feathered wings. These beings are known as the Abkalu. So, here's the deal with the Abkalu. According to ancient Sumerian texts, which are thousands of years older than this palace, the Abkalu were 7 demigods, wise ones who were said to have survived the Great Flood. Think about that. The story of a world-ending flood existed here long before it was written down anywhere else. These Abkalu, according to the legends, brought the gifts of civilization to a primitive, scattered humanity. They taught people law, farming, writing, and how to build cities. The greatest of these teachers was a being named Owens. And get this, Owens was described as a creature that looked like a fish, but underneath the fish skin, it had a human body, human feet, and a human voice. The ancient historian Berossus wrote that every day Owens would walk out of the Persian Gulf to teach humanity. Then at night, he would return to the sea. Now back to the palace at Nimrud. As archaeologists look closer at these winged Abkalu carvings, they notice the figures were almost always carrying 2 very specific objects. In one hand, they held what looks like a pine cone. In the other, they held an object that baffled everyone. It was unmistakably a handbag. This wasn't a simple pouch. It was a rigid, box-like container with a distinct semicircular handle on top. It often had intricate patterns carved into it. It looked less like a bag and more like a piece of equipment. So in the most famous carvings, the winged figures are holding this bag and using the pine cone to sprinkle something onto a stylized sacred tree. Mainstream archaeology looked at this and came up with a perfectly logical, safe explanation. They call the handbag a bandu, which is just a fancy word for a bucket inside. They said it held holy water, or perhaps pollen from the date palm. The pine cone or mulalu was simply the sprinkler. The entire scene, they claim, is a ritual of purification and fertility. The gods are blessing the sacred tree to protect the king and ensure a good harvest. For an agricultural society, this makes perfect sense. Case closed. But here's the catch. It's not that simple. What most people don't realize is that the Abkalu and Owens weren't just gods of farming. They were the original bringers of all knowledge, mathematics, astronomy, and architecture. The idea that their primary symbol was just a bucket of pollen feels, well, a little thin. And the bag they carried wasn't just a prop for a ritual, it was the source of their power. It was the container for the very civilization they were handing over. This single carving was strange. but it was just one carving. That is until archaeologists started digging thousands of miles away and thousands of years deeper into the past. This one carving was strange, but then it showed up somewhere it couldn't possibly be. Theme Enigma. The first domino to fall was in Turkey, at a site that simply shouldn't exist. It's called Göbekli Tepe. If you haven't heard of it, get ready. This site, found in southeastern Turkey, is considered the oldest known megalithic temple in the world. When archaeologists dated it, the numbers that came back were impossible. Göbekli Tepe is over 12,000 years old. Let's put that in perspective. This is 7,000 years before the pyramids of Giza. It's 6,000 years before Stonehenge. This is a site built by people who were supposedly primitive nomadic hunter-gatherers right at the very end of the last ice age. These people, who hadn't even invented pottery or farming yet, were building massive, complex stone circles. They were quarrying, moving, and perfectly placing T-shaped pillars weighing up to 50 tons. A single pillar can be 19 feet tall. Think about that. How does a small band of hunters organize the labor for that? Who fed them? Who was the architect? The very existence of Göbekli shatters the official story of human development. And get this. On one of the most famous pillars, Pillar 43, what do we find? Carved right into the stone, clear as day, are three distinct rigid handbags with the classic semicircular handles. This discovery is a bombshell. It means the handbag of the god's symbol is not from Sumer or Assyria. It predates them by thousands and thousands of years. It's older than writing, older than farming, older than civilization itself. So, how did these primitive people know about it? But the mystery doesn't stop there. It crosses an ocean. Let's travel thousands of miles across the Atlantic to ancient Mesoamerica, to the land of the Mech civilization. The Olmec are the mother culture of Mexico, flourishing around 1200 BC, and they're just as mysterious. Their civilization seems to spring up fully formed in the jungle with no clear predecessor. They're famous for their giant carved stone heads weighing tons that were moved 75 meters through dense swamps. But how? At a Keech site called Loventa, archaeologists found a carving known as Steely 19. This carving shows a figure sometimes identified as their god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who, just like Oan, was said to have brought knowledge and civilization. And in his hand, what is he clutching? The exact same boxy, rigid handbag. The crazy part is the visual similarity between the carving in ancient Iraq and the one in ancient Mexico. It's so striking it's impossible to dismiss. These were two entirely different worlds separated by a vast ocean and thousands of years. They had no contact. They couldn't have shared myths or art. And yet, here is the same identical unique symbol linked to the same identical story. A god bringing knowledge in a container. We even see echoes of it elsewhere. In New Zealand, the Maori people tell of their god Tan, who climbed to the heavens and returned with 3 key or baskets filled with all the divine knowledge of the gods in ancient Egypt. The Ankh, the key of life, is held by all the gods. It has a looped handle on top and a base. What if the Ankh is just a stylized two-dimensional version of the same device? So, here's the deal. We have a symbol that appears at the dawn of civilization 12,000 years ago in Turkey. It appears in Mesopotamia. It appears across the ocean in Mexico. Conventional archaeology says this is all a massive coincidence. They call it convergent evolution. The idea that different cultures just happen to invent the same exact design for a simple basket. But this isn't a simple basket. It's a very specific, rigid, and unusual design. The odds of this are basically zero. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. So if it's not a bucket, what was so important it was given to the whole world? The lost power source. This is the core of the mystery. The title promises that what's inside this bag shouldn't exist. And when you look past the mainstream pollen bucket theory, the possibilities get truly wild. This is where we step away from safe explanations and into what the evidence is really screaming. Let's get right into the theories. Theory 1. The Genesis box. This is the most literal idea. The bag held the seeds of civilization. This connects perfectly to the Oans and Quetzal legends. But what if this knowledge wasn't just how to farm? What if it was literal? Think about this. Right after the last ice age, around the time Göbekli Tepe was built, and something incredible happened. It's called the Neolithic Revolution. Agriculture didn't slowly evolve. It exploded almost at the same time in multiple unconnected parts of the world: the Fertile Crescent, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica. Was this an accident? Or were the seeds for our key crops, wheat, barley, corn, and the advanced knowledge of how to grow them delivered in these handbags? What if the bag was a high-tech, climate-controlled container for starting a new world? A kind of Genesis box. Theory 2. The portable power source. This theory is even crazier. What if the bag isn't a container at all, but a device, a portable energy source? Everyone's obsessed with how ancient wonders were built. How were the multi-tonon blocks of the pyramids lifted? How were the 50-ton pillars at Göbekli Tepe raised? How was the stone at Pumapunku in Bolivia cut with such laser-like precision that you can't fit a razor blade between the blocks? Mainstream history says it was all done with simple copper chisels, wooden rollers, and a lot of manpower. But many engineers say that's just not possible. What if the handbag was the answer? What if it was a self-contained power generator? A sort of ancient Baghdad battery, but thousands of years older and millions of times more powerful. This device could have powered advanced tools for cutting stone with sound or frequency. It could have powered a device that canceled gravity, allowing them to lift 50-ton blocks like they were pillows. This would instantly explain why the gods were always shown holding it. It wasn't a symbol of their power. It was their power. Theory 3. The genetic toolkit. This is the most what-if possibility. This is the one that truly shouldn't exist. What if the bag was a biological instrument? Look at the carvings again. The Agalu are touching the sacred tree, but in other carvings, they are shown performing this act on the king himself. The mainstream says they are purifying him. But what if purify is a mistranslation? What if they were upgrading him? Let's look at the other object, the pine cone. That cone shape is a perfect match for a tiny pine cone-shaped gland located deep in the center of the human brain, the pineal gland. In countless spiritual traditions, the pineal gland is known as the third eye, the seat of higher consciousness. The Vatican itself has a massive bronze pine cone statue in one of its main courtyards. So, here's the deal. What if the bag is the power source, and the pine cone is the tool? A tool designed to interact with the pineal gland. What if the bag held a genetic toolkit, and the cone was a delivery device? A high-tech scanner for manipulating the very DNA of early humans. This would explain the great leap forward, the sudden unexplained explosion in human intelligence and creativity that scientists still can't account for. What if the gods didn't just teach humanity? What if they made us? But one theory is so wild, it changes not just our past, but our reality. Why we forgot. For thousands of years, from the Ice Age to the height of the Assyrian Empire, the handbag was one of the most important symbols on Earth. It was carved into the most sacred temples, and then it just vanished. By the time of the classical Greeks and Romans, the symbol is gone. It disappears from religious art and public knowledge. It's as if the documentation of this all-important object just stopped. So what happened? Theory 1. The visitors left. This is the simplest explanation. The advanced beings, the gods, whether they were aliens like Ons or something else, finished their work. They gave humanity the push it needed, the seeds, the knowledge, the genetic upgrade. And then they left. They took their advanced technology with them, and humanity left alone was like a child trying to remember a complex lesson. The memory of the handbags faded and the carvings became just myths. But there's a darker, more unsettling possibility. Theory 2. A deliberate cover-up. What if the technology didn't leave? What if it was hidden? Think about it. What if the public knew for a fact that our entire civilization, our biology, our religions, and our science were a gift from some other intelligence? What would that do to the power structures of the world? Religious authority would collapse overnight. If the divine right of kings and priests actually came from a piece of advanced technology, their power would be gone. The new faiths that were rising, the monotheistic religions, needed to be the one and only source of truth. They couldn't allow stories of other gods bringing knowledge. So, an effort to hide the truth began. The old gods were turned into demons. The old symbols were forbidden. The handbag, once a symbol of divine creation, became a dangerous piece of evidence that had to be erased. And the very institutions meant to preserve history may have helped. For the last century, academics have deliberately dismissed this evidence. Why? Because it doesn't fit the neat, clean, comfortable timeline. The official story is that primitive humans slowly crawled out of the mud, invented fire, and then the wheel. The handbag suggests high technology existed at the dawn of time to seriously suggest this is a career-ending move for most academics. So it's easier to just call it a ritual bucket and move on. So, where did the real knowledge go? Let's go back to that giant pine cone in the Vatican, the PA. What if the Vatican knows exactly what the pine cone and handbag symbolize? What if the church in its rise to power systematically absorbed all the old pagan knowledge and technology and locked it away in its infamous secret archives? The paella isn't just art. It's a trophy, a symbol that they now hold the key. This leads to the most shocking theory. So what if the handbag tech was rediscovered in the 20th century? What if the Roswell crash in 1947 wasn't a weather balloon, but one of these devices? A portable power source. This would explain the insane leap in technology the world took right after World War II: microchips, fiber optics, lasers. What if it was all reverse engineered from a handbag of the gods found in the desert? This would mean the technology is not gone. It's just classified. The tech is hidden, but the civilization that made it left one final terrifying message: the handbag's true purpose. So here's the deal. We have an impossible object found all over the world. We have wild theories about what it was: a power source, a DNA editor, and we have a massive ongoing cover-up. But there is one more theory, one that ties all of this together and is the most down-to-earth of all. What if the gods weren't aliens? What if they were us? Everyone's obsessed with ancient aliens, but what if we're looking at ancient humans? Think about the timeline. Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old. What happened exactly 12,000 years ago? A global cataclysm, the end of the last ice age. A period called the Younger Dryas, where the climate went haywire and massive floods and comet impacts supposedly wiped the slate of the Earth clean. What if there was a highly advanced global human civilization before that cataclysm? A civilization that we call Atlantis, Lemura, or Mua civilization that had mastered physics, energy, and maybe even consciousness. And what if that civilization was destroyed by the cataclysm? A cataclysm it may have even caused. If that were true, there would have been survivors. A scattered few clinging to the remnants of their high technology. Now look at the Owens and Quetzalcoatl myths again. They aren't aliens from another planet. They are civilizer gods who come from across the sea after a great flood. They are the survivors, the Abkalu. These survivors, seeing primitive humanity, the other humans who survived struggling in the mud, decided to help. They decided to reseed civilization. And what was the one piece of tech they managed to save? The one portable, durable, all-in-one device that contained all their knowledge, the handbag. There is one theory, a single idea that, if true, changes everything we thought we knew about human history. It takes all the disconnected pieces of our ancient past, the strange myths, the impossible structures, the forgotten gods, and clicks them all into place. It starts with the biggest puzzle of all, Göbekli. Mainstream archaeology tells us this massive temple complex in Turkey was built 12,000 years ago by simple hunter-gatherers. But look at it. These are 20-ton pillars carved with precision, arranged in complex astronomical alignments. How could people who hadn't even invented pottery, who were still chasing deer with spears, build this? The theory provides a chillingly simple answer. They didn't. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built by them. It was built for them. It was a gift. A kind of restart center for a shattered world built by the survivors of a civilization we never knew existed. This one theory explains the age, and it also explains the global distribution. Suddenly, it makes sense why all these ancient cultures separated by vast oceans are all the same. How did the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and the cultures of the Indus Valley suddenly learn agriculture, writing, and astronomy all at once? They were taught, the survivors. These teachers traveled the globe. We see them carved in stone. In Mesopotamia, they were called the Abkalu, the 7 sages who came from the sea. In the Americas, you have figures like Quetzalcoatl. And what do we see them carrying from Central America to ancient Sumer, the handbag of the gods? All the myths are the same because they are all telling the same true story. This bag wasn't just a symbol. It was their survival kit, a library of lost knowledge. It held the seed bank to restart agriculture, the database for science and astronomy, and maybe the power source to build. This changes everything. It means the Abkalu weren't gods. They weren't aliens. They were us. They were our own forgotten ancestors, desperately trying to save what little they had left. The handbag isn't an alien device. It's a human invention. The last relic. The last proof of a lost human mother civilization. But this is where the theory gets dark because it leads to the final terrifying question. The one question we have to ask: if this advanced human civilization was so great, so powerful, where is it? Why did they fall? What could possibly wipe a global, technologically superior civilization off the face of the planet, leaving only a few survivors clinging to a handbag? What if the handbag isn't just a toolkit? What if it's also a warning? Think about it. What if the very technology that gave them their power, the secrets hidden inside that bag, is what caused the cataclysm in the first place? What if in their technological arrogance, they went too far? They mastered physics, they mastered engineering, but then they tried to master reality itself. Imagine a power source that doesn't just draw from the sun or the earth, but draws energy from other dimensions. A limitless, clean, terrifying power. One miscalculation, one tiny error, and the barrier between worlds collapses. The world that was is gone instantly, wiped from the map, sunk beneath the waves, or erased from reality itself. The symbol repeated on every continent isn't a gift. It's a message in a bottle carved in stone for the next cycle of humanity. For us, the survivors weren't just teaching us how to plant corn. They were telling us what we are capable of and begging us, pleading with us not to make the same mistake. We see the carvings, but we don't read the warning. We are missing the key detail. The evidence is all around us on multiple continents, all pointing to the same unsettling truth. Our history is a lie. We were not the first. We are just the latest, and the most advanced and dangerous technology the world has ever seen is still out there, waiting to be found inside the handbag of the gods. So, is the handbag a divine gift, or is it a warning from our own forgotten past that we are doomed to repeat? Let us know your theories below.